Welcome to another episode of The Illustrious Gentleman. The Illustrious Gentleman is a podcast hosted by myself, Ryan Cody, and my partner in comics, Scott Godleski. We get together each week, talk about comics, movies, TV, and work. We usually enjoy a drink or two while we do that. Justice League versus the Legion of Superheroes #1 is out this week. It's published by DC Comics, written by Brian Michael Bendis, drawn by Scott and colored by me. So pick it up, tell your pals, everyone within earshot how much you love it, how much you love Scott's art, how much you love my colors. It's awesome. I want to do this more. So pick it up, show some support. You can become a Patreon supporter of the podcast at patreon.com/super75studios. You get early versions of each episode, plus much more, usually unedited versions of the episodes. And go to TIGShow.com/merch to pick up one of our new shirts, coasters, or stickers. And TIGShow.com is also the main website, and you can figure out other ways to support us by going to that website. Scott's off this week, and I miss him so much it hurts, but I'm happy to be joined by graphic designer, comic artist, and illustrator Ryan Liebe. Look how efficient that is.
That is very efficient.
Yeah. How are you doing?
I'm doing very well. The weather's beautiful. Can't beat this great way to start a new year.
Yeah, we are. All my windows, for those of you who don't know Ryan or barely know me, we're in the same city. We're about 5 miles apart. But yeah, I got all my windows open. It's like first week of January. It's probably in the low 70s. As much as I bitch about it still being in the hundreds in November, low 70s in January is pretty nice.
I get a little bit of amnesia, I think. When the heat hits, I can't even imagine that it gets this low.
Yeah, I was telling my wife, I just noticed that there's a window in our apartment that I never move it looks into the neighbor's backyard, so I never even open it or anything. And not all the windows in this unit open, so I found another one that opens. So I'm super excited. I said, when it starts we can have all the windows open, we have another one to open. And I realized like that'll be between like the end of January and like March, and then it'll be too hot to have open windows. Right. Sorry about that. Amateur hour. My phone rang. Weather talk's out of the way. Weather's nice. So what are you drinking for the podcast today?
I went and picked up some Tower Station, some IPA from Mother Road.
That is a favorite on this podcast.
Yeah, it's pricey, but I mean, special occasions like this.
Yeah, special occasions. Yeah, I think Tower Station might be Scott's favorite kind of go-to IPA, or maybe I'm thinking of my brother. Either way, it's a good IPA from the fine folks at Mother Road Brewing in Flagstaff, Arizona.
I'm surprised too, because most local beers I have a hard time. It's either love it or hate it. It's got to be the water. I'm not sure. And I don't know if Flagstaff is known for having particularly good water.
I think they are. I think we've disagreed on this in the past, but
maybe.
I think the Flagstaff water is absolutely fantastic and amazing.
But I got the fluoride. I know it's probably good for your teeth.
It's my number one concern. Is dental health. All right, so you got Mother Road. I think that's like a 6.8% IPA, something like that.
Yeah.
Maybe. Yeah.
Oh, 7.3.
Ooh, okay.
Yeah. Serious
all right. All right. I'm having something special. This was a gift from my studio mate, Jay Gonzo. He basically gave me this gift the day after I vented about adults giving other adults gifts for Christmas.
I read that one.
And how I'm so against that and how I think it's ridiculous. The next day he brought me gifts. So I don't know if he did it on purpose or what. But anyways, this is a Gewürztraminer wine from France. Lucien Albrecht Tradition Alsace Gewürztraminer. GEWURZTRAMINER. Okay, there's lots of areas grow this, but this bottle is from France, and it's noted to have rich aroma of honey, red roses, tropical fruits, and spices, and it's 13.5%. Smells sweet. I like my sweet wines. It's like I'm in high school drinking like Boone's Farm. I like my sweet.
Is this a dessert wine then?
Yes, it's a dessert wine.
Oh, that's a
So
big glass of dessert wine.
well, if my dinner was a couple Miller Lights, then this is my dessert wine. But this is a very thoughtful gift from Gonzo. He mentioned this when he found out I started drinking wine a couple months ago. He told me about this type of wine that his uncle had always enjoyed. He thought I would like it, so he got me a bottle. Like, that's a thoughtful gift giver. We had a conversation, and then like 4 months later, he comes back to it. Like, my wife is a thoughtful gift giver in the same way. I am not. Like, I don't.
That must be even more annoying to you, as if an adult gives you a gift and that adult happens to be very thoughtful at gift giving.
Yeah, it drives me nuts. Like, because obviously I didn't get him anything because I'm against adults giving other adults gifts. So yeah, it's terrible.
What about at like birthday parties?
Especially not birthday. Well, no, I don't know. I mean, if you go to someone's party, then you might bring a bottle to share with everybody, or bring a nice 6-pack to share with everybody. But yeah, I don't understand the need for adults to give other adults gifts.
I'm kind of in the same boat with you. If it's somebody's birthday party, I'll like hand draw a card. But even then,
do you think they want that though?
Oh, you know what? I just do it for my own guilt, not to show up without nothing but good intentions.
Yeah.
I definitely do not want anything from anyone.
No.
Unless it's something that's really expensive that I would want, and then you could never accept a gift like that. So,
right. Yeah. Like, if someone was going to buy me like a motorcycle, like that would be a gift I would love to get, but I could never, the amount of guilt over that is it's too much for my weak shoulders and my sad back.
Yeah. You'd have to go shed a couple of tears while you're driving it down the road.
Right. All right. So on first taste, this is pretty smooth, and it almost has like a smokiness to it, which
is it a cold?
Maybe that's the spices. I don't know anything about wine. It is supposed to be served cold, but I always drink my wine cold because I'm a gentleman. So yeah. So far, so good. We'll see how I feel at the end of the bottle. But like I said, 13.5%, a little heavier than most wines, but that's fine. I'm good with that. Yeah, so I guess got some questions. We were texting about stuff we can't talk about. So then I'm just going to throw out some getting to know you questions is what we're going to do today, I guess.
That might be safer.
Yeah, as it pertains, especially to comics and stuff like that. But at first, I did want to mention so people who don't know you or didn't come out and see us at like Acme or anything like that, or haven't already heard the story that I tell every time the two of you and I meet someone new, is how I met you is basically on some stranger's lawn in the middle of an afternoon while I was getting beer and some local band was playing in like a porch, like under an awning.
The porch concerts.
Yeah, the porch
concerts. I don't know if we're allowed to talk about them. There's such a there's secret of the Encanto.
Probably get a cease and desist. They probably trademarked porch concerts and we're already in violation right now. Yeah. But yeah, basically I went to fill up a couple cups out of the keg, and I come back and my wife was talking to you, and so I assumed that I know that someone introduced you to her, but then long story short, we start shooting the shit, and then I find out from my wife, oh, he draws comics too. and I'm like, oh, of course he draws. Everyone draws comics.
Who doesn't?
Sure he does. Yeah,
Every Ryan. Whatever. Every Ryan in history of Ryan's draws comics too.
That's right. But your name is unique enough that it's easy to Google you. So I Googled you when I got home, and I told my wife, I was like, I'm so glad that he's good, because otherwise, it's tough. If you sucked, I don't know. I don't know if we'd be friends now if you were terrible, but you aren't terrible. You're really good. So
it's funny when people introduce you to somebody and they're like, they have a very similar hobby to you, or they have a very similar work to you. And you're like, oh, cool. That's awesome. Thank you for introducing me to somebody who's probably an asshole.
Yeah, it's always like like if I'm at a place and like my aunt's there, she'll tell me about like her second nephew also draws comics, and I should give him a call.
Oh man, you should, just right out of the blue.
I think one of my second cousins is actually a pretty well-known like indie cartoonist.
Oh, that's really cool though.
Yeah, we're friends on like Facebook. But yeah, it's just weird that what are the odds that that like two dudes who draw comics just meet in someone's front yard randomly, I guess. I mean, it wasn't random. We know people in common, but still, it was fairly random.
You know, I had gone through this really long dry spell of interacting with other creatives too. So it was really, I feel fortunate to meet you, and then sort of through you get plugged into this society that was just thriving, you know, just parallel to my own existence. So I feel really grateful for that too, honestly.
Yeah, I like meeting new local people that are, like I said, that are good. Or I mean, it sounds like an asshole when I keep saying like, oh, you're good or whatever, but you're easy to hang out with, because a lot of people are good, but they might be eccentric. Or then there might be people that you love to hang out with, but then you're like, that's, you're the whole package, man. You're the
that's
package.
really kind. I would love to be eccentric and avant-garde and wear like asymmetrical glasses or something. That would just be
Right.
I just don't have the personality. I'd rather just hide away and draw.
Yeah, I'm like an introvert who wants to be an extrovert, but I don't want people to like. I'm not gonna peacock and put myself out there. Like, I want to be on the down low where everyone's like, yeah, man, that guy's cool as shit. You should get to know that guy.
Yeah.
But I don't want to put any effort into those relationships or anything. I just want them to naturally evolve.
I kind of like those artists that adopt their persona so, and fully, that you never see an image of them outside of it. Like that illustrator, Rockin' Jellybean. Any photos of that guy, he's wearing this amazing luchador mask, so you don't know who he is, and he's really gregarious. But I mean, what's he look like? I think that's kind of a cool way to do that without being seen.
Yeah, there's also a lot of work though that comes in that, and like putting on a front. Like I would like to be able to put on a better front, but then get like 2 or 3 beers in me, then it's just me anyway. So I'm just, why put up the farce in the first place?
The closer I've gotten to 40, I realized that I'm not cool, and no one's looking to me to be cool anymore. So it's really, it's freeing to just
I have found my niche in middle-aged mediocrity as far as comic book artists go in the community. I'm fine with it. I don't need to be a hip young thing anymore, which is impossible anyways, but I'm happy to be in my spot of where I'm at.
Yeah, solidified.
Yeah, there we go. All right. So as I met you, I mean, you're more than a comic book artist. I mean, I guess we all are. But when I met you, it was about comics, kind of. So why don't we talk about comics?
Okay.
Were you into comics as a kid? How did you discover comics?
Oh man, I was probably one of the last generations of being so fortunate to go to like a Walgreens or something as a kid, and they had comic books. You can just go pick them up. So
right,
I was always aware of comics. I think for me it was like a couple of Archie's Ninja Turtle comics that just made me want to draw pictures so much that yeah, man. I was involved in comics very early. My first real collection started with a subscription to Amazing Spider-Man that was done by Mark Bagley. And I just got that every week in the mail. It's pretty awesome.
Yeah, I think I used to get subscriptions all the time when I was in California. And then when I moved to Okinawa, you couldn't really get them. But I remember as soon as I read like Excalibur #1, I got a subscription to it. It's just nice to get comics in the mail. Like it's just the subscription back in the day. Having a subscription to your favorite comics was great.
Oh man,
never had to worry about anything. Yeah, I mean they'd come like bent and shit, but who cared?
I did not care either. Yeah, man, I would just pull over that stuff. I remember my mom was always really kind of artistic, and so um, there's always that sort of push for it. I'd get coloring pencils as gifts or sketchbooks. Uh, And I remember one time she's like, "Oh, you should show me how to draw." And I was like, "Okay, yeah, let me show you what I could do." And she was drawing alongside, and she had this comic book open, one of the Spider-Man I was telling you about, and she proceeded to draw from this panel that was so fucking good. It just devastated me right there. I knew what it felt like to constantly struggle to be better than you wanted to be right at the beginning.
Oh, it's a good lesson to learn because
I think that was the only reason I pursued it. It was just I have to get there.
Yeah, I never went as far as to trace comics, which I mean, if you're starting out, I don't think there's anything wrong with that, but I just never did it. But I would like try to copy a drawing,
Yeah.
And I remember there's a Inferno issue of X Factor, and all those Inferno issues had these great double page spreads where it had all the characters' names and shit. And there Walt Simonson drew one, and he had a great Iceman who I've never understood the love for Iceman. I think he's super lame, but Simonson's rendition, like kind of hard edge, like he was carved from a block of ice.
Yeah, he had all the planes, right?
Yeah. And I remember I looked at that and I drew one once, and it looked, in my mind, it looked just like his. And I remember thinking, like, I got this shit. Like the only thing stopping me is that I'm like 12. Other than that, I'm well on my way. I know. It wasn't until I was in high school where I met the other only guy who I knew that drew comics, and he was way better than me, that I was like, oh shit. Like it's easy to think you're great when there's nothing to compare you to. In real life, obviously you look at a comic and you're not that good. But when I met a kid my age who could draw circles around me, it was devastating.
Meeting the other drawing kid, yeah. It was, when you met the other drawing kid in school, it was like this instant friendship formed on like upmanship.
Mm-hmm.
I gotta get
it's like all that,
like that still. Man, I wish life was like that still.
Yeah, but it's like, the guy can draw like better bubble letters than me, so my whole day's fucking ruined now. Like that kind of shit. So you're about the same age as Scott, and both of you really came in loving like the Ninja Turtles. And I've explained that, like, since I'm older than you guys, I've never had any affinity for the Ninja Turtles other than I did go through a phase drawing them like kind of like Frank Miller would draw them. Like I went through a phase of like gritty Ninja Turtles where I would just draw them, and I thought that was cool. But like the cartoon never did anything for me. I might have had one or two toys, but they were kind of like someone gave them to me. But I never understood the appeal of it. But maybe it's probably just an age thing. It's just that those few years make a difference.
Age probably does play a bit into it, because I went the whole 9 yards, man. I had the toys and all this stuff, but I was talking about this. I don't remember who, but when you look at those original black and white ones, they are not very good. And I think for me at that time, just seems so like approachable. The artwork was like, if you wanted to draw a Ninja Turtle, like, the standard was low. That I think the room for entry was just, it made you feel good because you can look at your shitty drawing and be like, that's pretty close, man.
I think once again, to call it back to my Gergerwitz Traminer source, I think Gonzo has said the same thing to me, like the appeal of indie comics for a lot of people. Or maybe it was Scott. One or the other said the appeal of indie comics is it kind of looks like you could do it.
Yeah.
Like a Rick and Morty comic. I mean, people buy it because they're funny, or I don't read them, but I assume they buy them because they're funny and shit. But also the artwork is good, but the artwork is not unattainable. It's not Jim Lee on X-Men. It's not, it's not like something that like you don't think you can ever do. Whereas I only grew up reading superhero comics. So I've always been disappointed in my own work. I've never been pleased with my own work because it doesn't look like Lee Weeks. It doesn't look like, Jim Lee in his prime. It doesn't look like these guys that I obsess with. It doesn't look like Chris Samnee or whatever. Like there's a lot of guys who are in the Chris Samnee style now that are popular, and I like all their work. but like I can never approach a level of storytelling that he has. But I could see if you grew up reading like real indie comics, kind of dirty bio comics or, whatever, autobiographical comics, then yeah, you would see a style that you would be like, oh, I enjoy this comic and I think I could draw like this.
Yeah. Well, for reading comics came a little bit later for me. I feel like you have to read that one comic that makes you realize like, oh, this could be some literature at the same time, and I think I read a lot of bubblegum stuff for a while where I was just sort of looking at the artwork. There was a stage where I feel like I'm constantly trying to learn how to draw constantly. And it got to a point where when I found Alex Toth, I realized that more lines meant so much, less, it's just
Right.
like, they're covering up or like finding the edge or showing a shadow or they're rounded with more and more and more detail, where this guy would just strip it down to like 3 lines and kick your ass with a drawing. Oh man, I think that's when I started to evolve into looking at comic art as something that was way more than what anyone gave it credit for.
Yeah, I mean, I'm immediately going to retract what I just said about like seeing art and always thinking like, I don't think I could do that. I'm not going to say I can draw comics as well as this individual, but I got out of comics in the late 90s. And for a couple of years, I didn't read any comics. And I was just disillusioned. Like I would send in samples and it didn't look like Mark Silvestri or Jim Lee or whatever. But I just sent an email earlier this week in response to an email to Brian Bendis. And I just let him know, like, hey, I just want to let you know that Powers got me back into comics. Like I had been out for a couple of years and Powers got me back in. And part of the reason Powers got me back in is because I was like, oh, I love this comic. And this guy Oeming draws nothing like Jim Lee or nothing like Salvador LaRocca or who the big superhero artists were when I stopped reading comics. Like this is a whole different style of comics I've never read. It's very indie based, but it's still a superhero comic. It's still a crime comic. It's still super cool. So yeah, I guess when I saw that, I was like, oh, you don't have to draw like these guys to work in comics. And I'm not saying I thought I could reach that level, but I realized I don't have to be Jim Lee to get into comics, if that makes sense.
But when we were collecting comics, you did.
Yeah, up until I was like in my early 20s, everything was 90s comics, Jim Lee, Art T-Bear, like you said, lots of lines, lots of smoke and mirrors. But yeah, and I think in the early 2000s, you got books like Powers or the Batman Adventures comics. Those were in the 90s, but Mike Parobeck on those books, or Bruce Timm style guys, guys who grew up on Bruce Timm and guys who grew up on Toth. The Chris Somneys were starting to come out, and the Evan Shaners and those dudes. And you realize like, oh shit, there's a whole new generation of guys coming up whose work doesn't seem it's equally or possibly better than the work I used to love, but it seems more accessible. Like a Chris Somney page is beautiful, but it's easier to digest than like a Jim Lee page, which I also think is beautiful.
Right.
So yeah, I think if everyone now was drawn like Jim Lee, I would never think that I could work in comics,
But the thing about comics is it's about a flow too and how you can read it. And those Jim Lee comics are beautiful, but I would rather just have each individual panel framed, because each panel is just so awesome. I mean, he took shortcuts sometimes, but
right.
As directing the flow of reading a story, they were so hard. I'd get caught up looking at the details that he would put on the gloves in Batman Hush.
Right.
Like he was definitely loving the drawing so much that it was so much going on in each one.
Yeah,
it's such an amazing skill to be able to convey a story with pictures and not noodle a picture to death in each panel.
Yeah, that is a skill that not everyone has learned. The less is more. I mean, you've always hear it's one of those things you hear and you give advice. Like if I'm at a con and someone asks for my advice, I tell them like fundamentals, life drawing, blah, blah. But yeah, I also tell them like, keep it simple, less is more, blah, blah. but that really comes to the forefront when you see guys who can do it as masterfully as, or, you know, when you read like a Sin City comic or whatever, like,
Oh yeah.
or early Hellboy, it's like, oh, 80% of the page is just solid black, and it works no matter what, you know. And I mean, I still use those cheats today. They're not nearly as good, but if I don't want to draw something, that shit's going in shadow. You know, like it's, you know, or I'm zooming in on something for dramatic effect, you know. And I've read reviews of my work, especially my earlier work, whenever it would get reviewed, you know, they'd be like, oh, the way he frames these faces and shit just heighten the tension. And I'm like, oh, I just didn't want to draw. Like I didn't want to draw more than like half the face, you know, or, you know, like
Well, the more you draw too, the more you draw, the more you're setting yourself up for the critique of like, I don't really, you know, the perspective, there's a tangent, it's the riskiest thing ever.
yeah. Yeah, I hate the far away shots and shit like that, because it's like there better be a fuckload of word balloons to fill this panel, or else I'm screwed, because it just looks so empty.
I draw those word balloons in right away. I'm like, okay, there's balloons going to happen here. I want to know what I'm working in between.
Yeah, it's funny, like working on the book I'm working on now, you know, Bendis is a lot like Claremont. So I was going to say, when you said you first started reading serious comics, I don't know if Claremont X-Men is considered serious comics or whatever, but for me, a lot of times now as an adult, something will come up, or I'll use a word or a phrase or whatever, and my wife, who's super well read and has like 10 times more degrees than I do, she'll make a comment like, oh, how do you even know about that if you never read these books or whatever? And I'm like, oh, I think I read it in a Chris Claremont X-Men comic. Like he was using words that I would have to stop and look in the dictionary, like, what the fuck does this mean? You know, like he just put so much on the page for you to digest. So that brings me back to, like, right now, Bendis has a lot of talking going on. And I don't think anyone would get upset if I said that. There's a lot of word balloons in a Bendis comic, especially in a Bendis superhero comic with 30 something characters. So there's a lot of times I was coloring the first issue of Justice League, and I was like, I imagine 40% of this page is going to be covered by word balloons, you know? So I was like, I wish our system worked to where it went to word. I guess I'm just being selfish, but I wish it was lettered before I colored it.
Yeah.
You know?
That's like, every designer's wish, I think, is to know, like, what are the parameters?
Right. Or what?
So much of a creative request is always like, produce this. You're like, well, let me know the box first.
Right. Yeah, it's like in my head I can picture where all the balloons are going to go, but I still have to color the whole page.
Yeah.
You know, and I get it. There's probably, translations, the balloons get moved around. Everything's different now because of digital. And I get that, but yeah, selfishly, it would make my job a lot easier if, I didn't have to color that extra 40% of the page. So, okay. Other than like Ninja Turtles and shit and Archie, which I'm sure you grew out of pretty quickly. What else were you into? Like, have you, or here's another question. Have you always been into comics, or did you lapse and come back? Or,
I went through a huge skateboarding part of my life where the artwork I did was sort of in between skate sessions, and comic books were mentioned, but not so much collected during those times. And I came back into comics pretty hard when I went to art school, which I did late in life. So I must have been early 20s when I went to art school. And so I went and started looking at the artists and storytellers that I saw as inspirational. And at that point, I think that's when my aesthetics matured, and I really like Rick Remender for his writing. I really like how he likes Mark Twain so much. I read some Mark Twain in college, and it resonates really well. So the Fear Agent, the whole saga is just, man, it's so good. It's so good. If you haven't read it, it's one of my favorites. I love the artwork within it. That's Tony Moore. and sometimes Jerome or Pina. So it's two really like some of my favorites still to this day. They're both. And I guess I stuck with indie for the most of the time. Yeah. Superheroes, they keep getting regurgitated so many times. It's kind of hard to keep coming back in. And they're like, now it's the origins again of Wolverine, or now it's like somebody dies, and
Right.
it's so crazy to me. I think it's so powerful when a story has the audacity to end.
Yeah, I think continuity is a major downfall to modern comics. Like I would love it if every X-Men book was a 6-issue finite story. You know, or everything's kind of like Hellboy. Everything's miniseries. Everything's done. You can
Yeah.
refer back to it, but you're not like buried in continuity. Yeah, because even right now, like I love the current artist on X-Men, but he does a couple issues, does something else, does some couple issues, does something else. It's going to be rebooted. There's another like an acronym going on, or another fucking like subtitle going on. Like I both miss the days of just picking up the next issue of Uncanny X-Men, like I had done the previous 40. But then I also am a believer in the fact that like story should dictate everything, not continuity.
Right.
Uh, so I guess I'm the worst kind of guy because I just want both. I want my cake and I want to eat it. I want my bottle of wine and I want to drink it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's just so much too. There's just so much good stuff out there. It's really hard to be a purist about anything.
Yeah. The first convention I ever did, I've told this story on this podcast multiple times, but the first convention I ever did, I slept in the garage / basement of a dude in Texas. All the single people slept in the garage and the married couples slept in the guest areas upstairs. But that's where I first met Tony Moore. Him and his wife stayed upstairs. Him and Kara stayed upstairs, and he was just starting Fear Agent. And everyone in our group, like I didn't know a lot about Image Comics at that point. Other than, I mean, I knew Image Comics, but I didn't know the current state of Image Comics, right? So we're there, and everyone's like treating this guy Tony like he's a big deal, right? And I have no idea who Tony is, other than I just met him. And then it wasn't until I got home and I like Googled him, because I don't even think I had a smartphone back then,
So he
2005
was
or
doing
whatever.
Walking Dead, or
He had already done Walking Dead and he was starting on Fear Agent. And so everyone at this con I was at just flocked to the table. He was being fawned upon. And in my little mind of not knowing anything, before you could Google shit on your phone and stuff, it wasn't until I came home I'm like, oh, he co-created The Walking Dead, which I had vaguely heard of. But yeah, he was just starting Fear Agent when I met him, basically. And I think I've read the first trade, but I've never stayed in that universe. But it's something I feel like I can go back to at any point.
No, yeah, you definitely can. Yeah, it's such a depth in the story that it gives you, like you said, it gives you your cake, or it gives you that really sugar rush right at the beginning. And then as you get into it, you grow with the character development. You realize like, oh, there's a lot more backstory in there. So it sets you up right away with an alien exterminator who's a drunk. He's a Texan, the big bubble dome,
Yeah, classic.
spacesuits, and yeah, the 50s style rockets, and then yeah, the depravity starts to set in, and it's a good read.
All right, so it like you, when I went to art school, I went in my early 20s, and that's when I got back into comics. But what made you? Was there a certain book or a certain time in your life where you're like, I think I want to pursue this? Like, I think this is something I want to make a go at.
Man, actually, it wasn't anything inspirational other than the lack that the community that I lived had nothing to offer, unless I wanted to either be in construction, or join the military,
Right.
or work in restaurants, or balance between, it was kind of a scary time. And I think my mom was suggested going to art school, and it just seemed so impractical. But I sent out a couple submissions, and I think the majority of the people are like, "Oh, this guy's going to take out some loans." So they tell you what you want to hear, and I jumped into art school. And I'm kind of a stubborn person, so I stuck it out, which was foolish of me. I give much different advice than than the things that I did, but yeah, I guess I was kind of all over the place. I went to school for animation. I thought I was going to draw animation, 2D animation too.
Yeah,
they tried to get me into 3D, and it was like, at first people are like, "Well, what do you want to do?" And I was like, "Oh, I want to tell stories, and I want to create worlds, and I want to, do all this stuff." And I had seen some cutscenes in between video games. In video games, I had seen the cutscenes. I'm like, "Yeah, maybe I want to make video games. Maybe I want to do this stuff." And I think the person that did get me in was smart enough to know that 2D animation would be something I was interested in.
Yeah, I had almost very similar, exact same things. Like, what am I going to do? I didn't go to real college after high school. I was a C student in high school. And it was my wife at the time just being like, "Well, you're only getting older, so you should go to art school and see what happens," right? But so it's the same thing. I wrote an essay, I provided some samples, and they couldn't wait to let everybody in that wanted to go there because it's like at that point it was like 3 times as much as a regular university, like Art Institute of Arizona. It was just like all art institutes nationally, just cashing checks, taking names. So it was super easy to get in. And I'm sure you went through the same experience where, and I also wanted, they told you, what do you want to major in? And I said 2D animation. And they said, we don't have that. We have a 3D animation degree, but you'll take all the 2D classes. So my associate's degree, because of course I couldn't commit to 4 years. My associate's degree was, my 18-month program was in 3D animation. But it was the same thing. Like they get you in there quick because they want you on the enrollment. They want your money. And then also, I don't know if it was the same for you, but I assume it was. I was realizing I'm not very good, and I'm in the 90th percentile of people I'm in classes with. So you might have gone to a better school, but I even had like teachers that once they saw me do like a couple sketches, they were just like, "You'll get an A, man. Just like, don't worry about." Like I had one teacher tell me like, "This class is not for you. Like, you could teach this class.
Oh, wow.
So just do whatever you want to do all semester, and as long as you just show up, I'll give you the A." And him and I would go.
That was my friend in the school I went to. He was phenomenal. Is phenomenal. It's troubling because when he picks up a pencil, I feel like he projects something onto the paper, and then he just is drawing. I don't know how he does it because all of his stuff is super cool, and it's frustrating, and I get mad at him. But he was that guy at school where he would come in and the teachers would assign a homework, and he would turn his in, and it would be better than anything that they could do. So at that point, they would almost defer to him. And whenever they're talking about something, they're like, "Well, that's just me. What does this guy want to say about that?"
Yeah, but the thing is I know I wasn't very good, so everyone else was terrible. I mean, there were people in some of my animation classes who could barely draw stick figures. They just wanted to draw. There's no prerequisite to get into these classes. At least the school I went to.
I was self-taught up to that point, and it was one of those things where I just start in one area of the page and just go. So anatomy, proportion, all that stuff. No way was I hitting that stuff. It was more, I guess you would call that fine art.
Yeah, well, I mean, sure.
You're either really good at painting or you're terrible at painting, and you're just going to double down on what makes you unique.
Yeah, like
now you're a fine artist.
I don't know if you ever saw these because, again, the age difference, but there were those how to draw comic videos. Stan Lee did them, and they were VHS, right?
Yeah.
the first time I ever saw like how to lay out figures and construct figures was the Rob Liefeld one, right? So
Oh
that's kind of,
man.
to this day, that's kind of how I block out my layouts, right? Is super square, super blocky. I know he didn't invent it. I'm just saying sometimes I do layouts and I'm like, oh, that looks like a Rob Liefeld layout, like I'm into it. And then later on, I got How to Draw Comics the Marvel Way, same block construction, usually. So when I was doing my first life drawing class, and we're doing like 15-second gestures and like 30-second gestures, I just fell back on how to construct comics that way. And I remember my instructor was like, you are levels above what everyone else is doing. Like right now, and in my mind, I'm like, and then we're supposed to have, because part of our homework for the semester was to go draw from life outside of class. And I never did that. So the night before the final, where he would look at your portfolio, I just filled pages with gesture drawings, and that I would do for comics, and he was like, these are amazing. Like, another thing. And again, this is a knock on the Art Institutes, not I'm trying to hype myself up. This is how bad those schools were. He looked at like 2 pages of my like 15-page portfolio and he closed it. And he's like, you got an A. Like they either didn't want to be there or they didn't want to waste their time on someone that they thought would be fine without, like, they didn't need, like, I was past maybe what they were going to teach that semester or what they were willing to teach me that semester, I think is the bigger thing. Because they always taught to the lowest common denominator. Right. I don't know about your art school, but every art class I ever went to was just catered to the one guy who just couldn't get his shit together and was terrible.
Wow.
You just repeat lessons for that guy. You do basic shit for that guy. I mean, I learned a lot in art school, but it was also kind of a waste of time at the same time. But yeah, comics, again, language and life drawing. Rob Liefeld and Chris Claremont told me everything I needed to know.
Yeah. You were sharing the wisdom when you were there.
Yeah, spreading the gospel of the Liefeld.
It must have been locality for me, because I went to Portland, Oregon. I was fortunate enough to get outside of Arizona for 4 years of my life and see a different perspective, and I chose Portland. So take that for what it's worth. But the artists that were there, the majority of them while I was there were people working in the industry. I had a Flash animation teacher that was doing background stuff for The Simpsons. Will Vinton, the guy who coined the term claymation, who came up with the California Raisins and a lot of those Christmas specials and that Mark Twain thing. He was the resident artist, and he'd walk around the halls and try to like recruit people to help him produce something.
Right.
And then there was just some really talented people. And our dean was like, I think an art director on the Animaniacs, so there was some talent there. And I learned a lot. And the thing I learned the most there was that I sucked, but I didn't suck the most. I sucked like 3rd tier suck. And so I felt like I could climb, and I was very invested in getting better.
Right. Yeah, it sounds like your art institute might have been headed up mostly by animation people.
Yeah.
Mine was headed up almost all by like kind of fine art people, graphic design, fine art, that kind of shit. So, or I think at that time maybe Phoenix was also leaning heavily into the video production part of it. So there might have been a lot of that, but like the animation to me always seemed to get kind of downplayed, the animation department. Like it was just like not their priority. The one here also had a culinary school, and that was huge. So I just think like we were always like just take these kids' money and shit them out.
Yeah.
There's no animation industry in Arizona. Like right. when they recruited me or / let me in, they told me, Fox Studios, they just made that Atlantis movie, right? That was made in Arizona. So they're like hyped on that. And they're like, so yeah, our top like 3% almost all go over to Fox immediately after graduation. And so, or maybe it's, Sony Animation. So you go over to Sony Animation right after graduation if you're in the top 3%. And then by my second semester, one of my teachers was a laid off, they were doing animation at Sony, got laid off, and then they're taking this job. And by the time I graduated, Sony had left, Fox had left, so there was no
shit.
It was basically like, hey, you want to come to Arizona? You might be able to get a job storyboarding, paying minimum wage. So at that point I had 2 kids. So move your whole family out to Southern California for like a $30,000 a year job that in California money, that's yeah. So it's like I went at the wrong time. I don't advocate art school for anybody. No. But if you're gonna make that mistake before you have a wife and kids.
Yeah.
So that you can then follow up on that mistake and move to Southern California or wherever you want to work.
The real secret to breaking it into any sort of art field is find another person who's doing it and become friends with that person, because there's no other avenue, really. I feel like you could be extremely good and still not ever meet the right person. Then who cares?
Yeah, networking is more important than anything. I mean, I was joking to somebody who's like congratulating me on coloring this DC book, and I remember just saying like, "Oh, well, I've been buttering up to Scott for a decade, for like 12 years. I put in my time to become his colorist." So it's a lot of it's networking. A lot of it is just don't be an asshole. And we talk about this all the time. Don't be an asshole. And I understand that, especially in the arts, I hate that term, but in the arts, you get a lot of people with who are like shy or anxious or have anxiety or whatever. You got to be able to deal with that a little bit in public.
Overcome that shit, man.
Overcome it. If you force it, if you have to, create a persona, create a BarCon persona, not one that molests women or anything, but one that's just fun to be around. One that's fun to be around, and one that is willing to stay the course. Like if there's a writer who's out with your group, and just don't be offensive, and don't be bothersome, but just be around and known to be a guy who does quality work. Doesn't have to be the best work, just has to be good work,
on time,
good to work with, and don't have any stories of you like fucking puking in someone's bed or something like that at a con. Try to keep that shit to your own hotel room.
I think there's a level too, like that you said was committed. I think that stands really tall, is that you're striving, I don't know. There's like so much punishment in drawing all by itself that you kind of have to be a little bit of a masochist and want to do it.
Yeah, I was telling Gonzo the other day. This is becoming the Gonzo Mentioned podcast. But I was telling him the other day, like, I hope I can just color after this next year. Like, drawing comics and trying to get gigs drawing comics is a grind. It's a grind, and it's a grind doing the work, because I don't think I've ever really loved it. Since I was like a teenager, and it was just fun to just tell the story. But like, I'm not so in love with it that it's something I have to do. So if I'm going to grind on getting work, I want to grind on getting work as a colorist, because I can do more work in less time. My ceiling is better as a colorist, I think. And I'm happy with that. Trust me. I have no love loss for, thinking I'm going to be some great penciler or something like that. I forgot commitment. So yeah. So like I'm going to commit myself to doing good work, being easy to work with, being on time, being reliable, rather than there are some guys who are just like, well, fuck deadlines. I'm going to give them work that's going to blow their mind. Yeah. And those are guys, there are guys that can exist like that. They're called Adam Hughes. There are guys that can do that. But I'm happy being one of the guys who can just be reliable and be on time and constantly get work. Like if I was around in the 60s, I would be a bullpen guy at Marvel, and I would be happy to be a bullpen guy.
Oh, I think that would be super exciting.
Yeah. There's no weight on your shoulders. Just do good work. It's almost like you want to do good work without really. I'm not saying I don't want to stand out, because I do want to be requested to work with other artists and stuff like that. But I don't need to be like, the next Dave Stewart. I'm fine with just being the dude who gets 2 monthlies a year, 2 monthlies a month, every year. I want to be that guy.
There is that aspect, so much of that aspect. They're like, I'm going to become famous, or I'm going to be a rock star of comic book art, or if you're just going to, that means you have to step it up every single time. Oh man, it's got to be the hardest thing to be Stan Lee sometimes, or Jim Lee sometimes, where everything has to be super good or detailed, or you have to get all the chest hair in there. Once you start becoming synonymous with the look of your art, that means everything you do has to be that. Oh, and then you can't really break out of it. For like Frank Cho, you're like, this, maybe that guy can't break out of that anyway. But to become known for a look, I don't know if I'm that consistent sometimes. When they say you got to find your style, I used to try to figure out what that meant. And I remember asking for a teacher if he would validate me for a licensing deal through an agency. And he took a look at my work and he's like, you need to pick a style. You're all over the place. You should take a class on illustration. I'm like, I'm not going to take a class on illustration. What does that mean, a style? And so I started looking at it. I was like, oh, what should I do? What should my style be? Should my lines all curve a certain way? But to become synonymous for a look, maybe that's something that you can do and you can produce all the time. But I feel like for me personally, that would all of a sudden become very trying,
Okay,
being
so
consistent would be better.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I was going to say there's a famous story, but I think I'm the only one that I'm the guy I know that repeats it. So I don't know if it gets repeated in other circles, but I think it was like Bernard Chang back in the heyday of comics. And again, apologies to everyone that I'm about to mention by name. Only Bernard Chang, so apologies to him. But the rumor I heard was he drew Dr. Mirage #1 for Valiant in like 1992 or whatever, or 94, probably 94. And it sold like well over 1 million copies. And, everyone got royalties at that point, like good royalties. So I remember like #2 never coming out. And then like, it was like long before anything else was followed up. And the thing is, like, he took the money he made from drawing the first one and then just lived off it and practiced his craft. And then he comes back and he's like an amazing artist. So it's like he's doing what you just mentioned. Like, it's so hard if you're working as an artist. It's easy as if you're a hobbyist artist, which I don't mean that in a bad way, but if you have a good job and you can just draw on the side, you might have the best of both worlds because you can experiment and take your time, and you don't have a daily deadline or you don't have a weekly deadline, and there's a joy in that there's not in deadline based freelance work. But yeah, I always love that story that he was just like pieced out for a couple months and like just drew for himself.
There's an artist, Dave Raprosa. You might have encountered him on social media. He's pretty popular, but at one point he did the same thing where he was looking at his work and he was like, I'm compensating with all this rendering. And then he kind of like rented a cabin in the middle of the woods and just went and learned how to draw and came back. And I mean, kind of picked up where he left off. Honestly, he's quite good.
Yeah. Or
really
also
good.
Yeah. Also like a Dan Panosian, who in the 90s,
yeah,
everyone was like, oh, Jesus. But then when you talk to him, he's like, I was fucking like 17 and I was told to draw this way. Because I remember when I became reacquainted with his work in the early 2000s, I was like, this can't be the same fucking dude.
Yeah.
But then I've met him, and I've actually done like I've done some, like, he's hired me to color stuff for like toy shit, stuff like that. So we've gone back and forth a few times over the years. And yeah, he basically just said, like, I was paid to draw this way. I could have always drawn another way, but this is where the money was. And then I also realized, like, oh shit, you're like 3 years older than me. Like when I was bitching, or like Marat, like I know Marat Michaels now, but I remember when I got Brigade #1 and Marat drew it, I was like, this isn't Rob. But now that I know Marat, I realize when I was 16 being like, fuck, this isn't Rob. Marat was 17 drawing that. He's a year older than me, or something like that, drawing that comic, probably being like, he probably felt the way I felt, except he was getting paid a lot of money to draw that comic.
A lot of money.
Yeah. And so as a much older man now, like looking back, I'm like, oh, I feel bad for my younger self who was so naive and saying like, first of all, this isn't as good as Rob Liefeld, which that's a different podcast, and I will fight to the death for Rob. But for me to be like, oh, this competent artist who I didn't know at the time is getting paid very well to draw this comic, I'm just mad because it's not Rob, and I'm gonna go fucking pout. Or, I learned later that, oh, this guy could have been better, but he was making a lot of money drawing this way in the 90s. It's so ridiculous. When you're a kid, you almost want to be that famous guy, or you want to be the guy who is only known for their best work. But trust me, man, when you're a 46-year-old fucking dude just breaking into mainstream coloring, you are thrilled to just get the work, get the check, do good work with good people. There's no shine on it for me anymore.
No, there's no shine. I think as soon as you get rid of the shine, it feels so much better.
Mm-hmm.
Once you get rid of it, just kick that right off.
I agree. All right. So your job right now currently is you're a senior graphic designer. So what is it? How do you approach that different than comics or illustration? What is so just like if you work for a big publisher, an editor tells you this is what we want, and your goal is to meet that while trying to do it as artistically as possible. It's the same thing for you. You're kind of just doing, you have more typography, I guess, and you have other elements right now, but you still have to try to, someone who can't do your job is trying to tell you what they want, and your goal is to meet that, whatever they have in their brain, right?
It's so interesting because so much of that is emotion that you're trying to interpret from the person requesting whatever this is if it's going to be packaging, or if it's going to be promotional material, or if I'm going to direct a video, or, and what I'm learning more and more is that they'll use a set of terms and it'll be consistent, and it'll be less as in synonyms, more like when they start talking about the light, they'll bring it up a couple times. They're like, okay. So whatever this is needs to be warm. It's a warm light. I think you're trying to produce something that doesn't make them have to imagine anything. First of all, never give them anything that you're asking them to imagine something. Imagine if this, that's out. You're done already. Give them something that is so close to being done that it could go out right now. Oh, it is the hardest job in the world, I feel like, sometimes, trying to give somebody what they want. And that's what I get asked for all the time. It's like, I want something like this. And it's an emotion. It's like being asked to create a logo almost every day. And I hate logos so much. I hate logos. If anybody ever asks me for a logo, the first thing I tell them is no. It's the worst thing ever.
First thing I tell them is no, and then I slam the door in their face. It is like, especially coming up through indie comics, like every book that I drew before I was hired to do stuff. Well, not even that. Like every book I drew that before, like Dynamite, when I worked on the Phantom, it just assumed I was going to also design the logo of the comic, and like trade dress, my very first comic, I designed like the trade dress. I did the logo.
You're good at it.
They had a designer there that would then, like, I would work with him. But there's also been other gigs where I haven't. Like, I have to ask, like, what do you think the spine width is going to be, so I can make the right file for the spine or something like that. But yeah, it's like it's that. It's a one, like, you're being asked to do. You're a one-stop shop. They're coming to you with like a fucking thought balloon of an idea, and then they want you to realize that idea. That's what I didn't love about working in indie comics. Like, a lot of guys would love the freedom. I can set the design. I can set the way this world looks. I can set all that. There's a part of me that likes doing that. But then there's also a part of me that Maybe it's like a masochistic thing, but there's a part of me that likes just being told what to do and get the job done. I don't mind that one bit.
Because what it is that you put a lot of time into something and you'll present it, and the reaction is like, this is awesome. What if we changed everything about it? And you're like, oh, it's like a gut punch.
Right.
I wish there was those moments in those conversations where I'd be like, okay, and then I could walk around the block and then come back better composed. But it's those things where you just have to like, all right, yeah. Working in-house has these sort of benefits of, you get stable pay, you get a salary. Man, I get amazing benefits. I get unlimited PTO.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I really struggle with getting excited about projects and realizing that what I like is probably not going to go. And that I might have to do something that is completely outside of what I consider aesthetically pleasing, and then produce that. And that can be, that's kind of hard sometimes for me, because I want to do something cool, or I feel like I have a better understanding of how a design might hit in an industry. I would love to be creative director and then take anything that didn't fly on the chin. Just come to me. If you're too afraid, that's okay. Let me put this cool stuff out there. I guarantee you people are going to love it. I think what happens most of the time is that you present something. I present something. And for me, they're safe and then they're slightly skewed. And I want to skew the hell out of it.
Right.
Just so it becomes different from what you see. Because everything is so straight and perfect and clean. And I want to, I just want to make it uncomfortable enough that when the people look at it enough to want to complain, they still can't stop looking at it.
See, if I was, I just in any industry, I've seen your sketchbooks. Like, you should just be able to photograph something in your sketchbook and just throw a logo on it. I don't think corporate comics, corporate anything, I don't think they understand the power and the emotion of the early stages of the work, the layouts, the sketches, and I'm terrible. I never sketch, but a lot of times my layouts, by the time I tighten them up and ink them, I hate that drawing by the time I'm at that point. And then knowing me, I still have to color it. So, that's part of the reason I'm tired of doing the whole thing, right? Because I'm doing 4 or 5 steps, seeing the same panel over and over again. But yeah, that was also in one of those videos, the Stan Lee hosted videos. Someone mentioned like, it's never going to be as creative or energetic as it is in that first.
Yeah.
Like, this is it. Like, this layout, this sketch, that's the power. Everything else is how much, if that's 100% magic, when it's finished and printed, we hope it retains 20% of that magic.
Yeah.
It's about stripping away as little magic as possible.
That's pretty amazing. I mean, I've been working with this videographer trying to come up with a video representation of some of these ideas that we'd have for marketing. And we sort of came together in this moment where we're shooting this video that was pretty much already late. So we had to bypass the approval process, which was kind of fun. And we're working on it. He was telling me, he's like, I'm actually wouldn't let anybody hang out with me during this particular part of the shooting. But since I had some insight into what I wanted directing this thing, he's like, I had to let you, and I'm glad because you kind of understand where we're going. And I was like, for me, I feel like this is the oh shit moment in every type of creation, is that it has all the potential and you're trying to wrangle some of that in there to present. And I think it will look good to those who don't see where it could have been, because there's that moment in a rough sketch or a thumbnail or, an idea where it could be amazingly good, and it probably won't be at the end, but it has all that potential in the world to hit the mark.
Right.
And that's a very scary place to be. And I think
Yeah.
as a designer, as an artist, you have to live in that realm a lot. And it's, for me, it gives me anxiety. And it was really comforting to see this other guy going through this anxiety and be like, no, man, this is it.
Right.
But for a client, you can't expect them to sit in that moment comfortably.
Right.
And I think for me, I'm learning a lot to not put people in that oh shit moment that as a designer I have become accustomed to. I mean, that's what you end up doing. And I think Scotty or anybody that picks up a pencil to make a comic is there is this moment where like, do I remember how to do this? Is this going to work out okay? Are people going to like this? And then at the end, it is what it is, and people appreciate it because they just see it. And maybe you focus on all the mistakes because in that one particular moment, it could have been the best thing you've ever created.
Yeah, I just went through this moment this week. I was coloring, and it seems weird because it's just one issue to another issue. But like, when I started working on Justice League, I'm so kind of caught up in like, I want to make it slightly different, and I want to believe that's why they hired me over established guy. So I brought something different to the table, but I can't go so left field, to where like people who have been reading these comics for a decade are like, what the fuck is this? So I see myself now that the first issue comes out in a couple of days as we record this, like I look at myself now, I'm like, oh man, I wish I didn't do that. Like I wish I could still go back, like I I would like to be able to take a week before the trade is released, so next summer, and just ask my editors, can I just get a week to go through start to finish, page 1 to page 130 or whatever? Can I just take a week and make tweaks and re-upload? I mean, the answer is probably no, because that shit's lettered and we're done with that. But that's something I struggle with. Is like, what did I do something different on this I wouldn't normally have done because my head was it was racing about what expectations were, as opposed to what I think is the best storytelling decision, as opposed to what my editors think is the best storytelling decision. Like to my credit, to my editor's credit, I don't get a lot of notes, almost no notes. So maybe they must like what I'm doing. So maybe if I had pushed it, I would get more feedback. Or maybe if I had pushed it, I would get no feedback, and it would be more quote unquote me, which I hate. I hate what I just said, all of it. But you know what I mean? Like
I feel you, man. I feel you.
Now,
it's this desire to leave a mark, but at the same time, put a smile on somebody's face, specifically this person that means the most.
Right,
put a smile on that person's face,
right? Because that person's smile is attached to the hand,
right?
But also signs the checks and shit like
right.
that. So, yeah, I get that. All right. So as we're wrapping up, why don't you tell me? So, because you're also like, I don't know. Again, I just see your illustrations and I look through your sketchbook whenever we see each other. Like I also think you're a great illustrator. So I was wondering if there's any kind of creators or artists you're into now that maybe I or the listener doesn't know about that you can turn us on to. I love discovering new artists, but it's also an anxiety thing for me as well. Because if they make comics, I'm finally getting to do what I wanted. I love coloring comics. It's what I love doing more than anything else. And I'm finally getting to do that more. But there's also like dudes coming up, dude and dudettes. It's a gender neutral term. They're coming up and they color at a whole different, it's like the way I can't like wrap my head around like, trying to think of like some wonderkin artist that's out, like a James Herron. I could never wrap my head around how when James Herron was coming up, how he drew so different from everybody. His influence weren't obvious the way everyone else's are, and now he has people like trying to draw like him. There's also a level of colorists coming out now that are so far beyond what I think I can even. Like I should be like I can't always look at a comic and be like, how did they color that? Like I can't reverse engineer everything, and that terrifies me. So I'm both happy to discover new people, but also I'm happy to not discover new people that are going to make me feel bad about myself.
Man, that's a really salient point that I've kind of encountered recently too. Is this sort of encountering younger people that are just killing it. But I think also if you look at the accessibility to information,
Yeah.
your accessibility to just the how-tos that I did not get.
Yeah.
Even you would have the book like Learn to Draw the Marvel Way. They skipped over a lot of stuff, really. They're like,
Yeah.
first of all,
Yeah.
draw for most of your life and get really good, and then make this book on how to draw.
Yeah, let me cut you off for 1 second. You just triggered a memory. Is a couple of weeks ago, I was sent a YouTube, or not a YouTube, Jesus Christ, Facebook message from someone, and my nephew was drawing. My best friend's son was drawing. He's 6. He was drawing a Deadpool from watching a YouTube video on how to draw a Deadpool. So it's basically like draw this drawing I did of Deadpool. But the artist walked him through it, and it was at 6. He was as good as I was at 15.
Yeah.
So to your point, yeah, like you could just kids these days, everything. Like my dad, who's in his 70s, if we're working on a car, he'll be like, pull up a YouTube video. That guy will show you how to do it. Like things are so
It's
everything
amazing.
is
It's the Matrix.
Yeah.
It's the Matrix. You get plugged in, you're driving a helicopter all of a sudden. My wife's in human development too, and she talks about this moment in brain development at the very young ages. And we go through a couple of those stages where our brain becomes pretty plastic, they'd say, where you're capable of interpreting new information into the way that you think. And those very early ages, they are making so many brain connections that to learn something like drawing, it might not be that difficult. But we just had to pursue it so doggedly that
Yes.
that we're still pursuing it, that it's a struggle.
I would love to talk to. I don't have any friends who grew up with someone encouraging. Well, that I know about. I'm sure there are people I know, but of people I know about, who grew up with like encouraging aunts or parents, or like you said, your mom could draw, but if she's not sitting there with you drawing 3, 4, 5 nights a week,
Yeah.
then that's different. Like I would like to meet an artist my age who grew up in a house full of artists who encouraged and taught them. Like at what level is that? Like that's a Pepe Larraz, which to me, I mean that's a Stuart Eamon, and that is someone who, like, I'm not saying those guys had that. I'm saying that's how good I think you would have to have someone every day teaching you something new to reach these levels that I don't understand.
It's a really good special is it's on PBS Masters, and it's Andrew Wyeth, and his father was NC Wyeth. And Andrew Wyeth got to be really renowned in the fine arts, and he did watercolors that, I mean, if you looked at them, they're so good. They're amazingly good. And I'm sure you've seen, everyone who's taken any sort of art history has seen this guy's work. And his father was extremely gifted. I mean, amazingly talented, just phenomenal. But he always wanted to be considered a fine artist, and he was only considered to be an illustrator. And he had illustrated things like Treasure Planet, or not Treasure Planet, sorry. That's the 7.3% right there. Treasure Island. I think he died in the very early 1900s. But his life was just so amazingly, Andrew's life was so amazingly geared to being an illustrator. And I think all of his siblings too. And I don't remember all of their names, but Andrew was the most successful out of all of them. He just, this PBS story tells about the influence that his dad had, and he had these rooms where he would collect all this reference that he would use for his own illustrations, or he'd hire models, and his whole life was around painting. And so you would see Andrew really, just walked into it and like sat into it. This just happened to him just to become an illustrator,
Right.
and is exceptional. He's amazing. And I wonder what kind of things that he was able to achieve at such a young age that when I sit down to draw that I am still thinking about. Like I'm still thinking about the relation between a shoulder and the head and this. And I wonder if for him, he was just, I know anatomy, I know this, I know that. Now I get to experiment beyond those realms. I don't know how to articulate that better, but yeah, it's got to be really nice to have somebody who's invested enough time to help you at a young age clear those obstacles that make drawing so hard.
Yeah, it becomes subconscious, like walking or talking or anything. It's just something you're absorbed into as you grow up. All right, so wrap it up with it. Who should I be digging now?
You probably know the guys that I really like. And I grabbed this guy's book because it was on my thing, and I can never say his name, but Victor Valkachev.
Oh yeah, I have a print of his in the studio.
Oh man, for right now, this guy, I am just dying over this guy's artwork. It's just so exceptionally good. He has this sort of quality where it's effortless. Oh, I don't know if it's effortless, but like it seems exaggerated and yet at the same time very structured. He draws in the way that I wish that I could just sit down and draw. It's frustrating. I really, really love that guy's work. Another artist is Corey Loftus. You're probably familiar with. He's a concept artist for Disney. He worked on all kinds of stuff like Pixar's, or maybe it's only Disney, Wreck-It Ralph. He's all over the place. I think he did all the character design and stuff for Zootopia.
Okay.
That's kind of all furry stuff. I don't know if that's the greatest stuff to like send you on a search for, but
I'm sure listener is a furry.
Yeah.
So it's fine. Yeah. Yeah, I mean that's when to kind of go full circle, because I'm kind of losing it on the 13.5% wine. Yeah, when I was in art school and I wanted to go 2D animation, and then there wasn't that, so it was 3D animation. What I really loved, and I assume it might be the same for you, was when I came out of that, I'm like, I either want to storyboard or I want to do character designs. I want to do story Bibles. You know, and obviously no one wants to do in-betweens. No one wants to do cleanups. No one wants to be the grunt of it. Everyone wants to be the creator of it. But as I get older, I realize there's no way I would ever be talented enough to be a character designer, because that's the cream of the crop as far as I'm concerned. But also, I could do storyboards because they got to be done fast. That would be that's the only way I could be able to be a storyboard guy, is when push comes to shove, especially if the money's there, I can work fast as shit. So that's always been, because also no one gives a shit. 4 people are going to see your storyboards, or, not, I shouldn't say 4. No one at the end result's going to see your shitty storyboards. So I feel like I could be a shitty storyboard guy. I couldn't be a good storyboard guy because his name's Gabriel Hardman. But I forget what I'm into. That made me think about that. Like the character designers really kind of are the best dudes. I mean, they're not the best sequential artists, but as far as get to live in the best life ever, a dude who can just create and do weird shit all day and just draw some turnarounds or sketches, I love that.
Also too, is that the film industry is committed to just trying to duplicate the things that they create, instead of going through that whole, how do I make a person happy? Everyone's like, we just like what you do, and how about we make a movie with the stuff that you do? That sounds beautiful to me.
Yeah, I'm into it. I mean, they're all better than me, but that's kind of like
they're different than you. They're
occasionally
different than you.
Occasionally, though, I'm happy that the industry is trending that way, because even though I had maybe a very, very tiny part of it, I helped pave the way for some kid to not have to struggle for 20 years or for 15 years, or like, I don't really get jealous. I mean, maybe if someone came up and told me, like, you didn't get that job because we gave it to this 20-year-old who learned how to color through a YouTube tutorial, and they're
Sure.
going to get the job and not you, then maybe I'd be a little fucking, the old man in me would be grumpy. But the old man in me now, I love seeing these young kids, like, because I've stopped trying to compare myself to them. And I think that also comes with age, is like, I'm never going to be like a character designer who could think of some of this weird shit that I love. This just never comes into my brain. I could never do that. But I'm no longer competitive with any of that. I'm just happy. I'm happy everybody's getting theirs. And if I can get a piece of it, I'm fine.
Yeah, yeah. We create our own happiness, really. And if it's career oriented, then it gets really hard to maintain. Also, when you meet these people that I aspire to, I've met Corey Loftus in person, and I think he's amazing. I'm keen on Corey Loftus, but when I went to this place, it was just like a bunch of dudes that looked just like me, being very eager to meet this guy. And it's like the pinnacle of success is a bunch of like fucking dudes that are the fawning over you. I mean,
yeah,
you're technically really amazing, sir, but is it the famous that people want to be? I don't know. I don't know if I would want to be as famous for something like being a character designer. I don't know if I could handle that celebrity, that particular genre of celebrities fans very well. I think that would be trying on me personally.
Yeah, they might be a little needy. All right. Also, I love that I can hear your dogs barking, because it's par for the course. You're filling a need that I don't have dogs. So if there's not a dog barking during the episode, listener wouldn't know what to do with themselves.
That's not my dog. My dog has a breathing problem. You would definitely hear her if she was around. That's some other healthy, vocal dog in the neighborhood. I have the door open. I was living carefree in the moment.
Yeah, I'm sorry to hear about your dog. All right, so what do you, if you're gonna rate that beer on a scale of 0 to 5, and we do halves, what would you think it is?
0 to 5?
Yeah.
Nothing's
ever, 2 drinks in the history of this podcast have gotten 5s, so we don't just give them away willy-nilly.
Yeah, I feel you. I mean, from Ball, they put a lot into this. They put enough into it to be a 5, but I'm not that generous a person. I will say, how about for IPAs? It's a 4.5.
There you go. It's a very good modern IPA.
The reason I picked an IPA is that if I had gone with my normal drink, which is really cheap, I would probably have like 6 or 7.
Yeah.
So
that's yeah. This bottle of wine's almost gone though. Yeah, it's a good beer. The Gerwisch Traminer. I can't pronounce it. It's good. It has like I said, that little smoky. And normally I don't like smoke. Like I don't like Scotch. I don't love smoke in my drink. Good Scotch is fine, but it's probably not. It's not a woody flavor. It's not a smoky flavor. It's a flavor that I can't properly discern or explain, because it is very fragrant. But I mean, shit. I only saved the bottom of the bottle so that my wife could try it. Otherwise, I would have almost killed this whole bottle. So it's very drinkable. And I don't think it's as sweet as some people think. So maybe my threshold's different, but like this isn't that sweet.
It must not be a dessert wine, because those dessert wines,
Yeah, this is more tart than sweet. Kind of like this podcast. I would give this easily a 4. But it's better than my $3 bottles of wine. I'll tell you that much. But don't tell Baybridge that, because I'm still waiting for the sponsorship.
My lips are sealed.
That's right. All right. Was there something we didn't touch on that you wanted to touch on? Do you want to give out some social media? Is there something you don't post as much on social media as I thought you did?
You know what? I recently gone through a change. I went through a phase, and I've been doing a lot of work. And when I get to the point where I'm going to post it, I just feel so lackluster all of a sudden. You know, I don't know if I'm going to show up on anybody's feed. I don't know. I just got kind of, you know, social media just doesn't have this flair that it used to, where I would share stuff and people, and I don't know. It just got weird. It just got weird recently. Maybe I'll start posting some stuff. I do drawings all the time. I'm constantly just
yeah. I literally the other day almost bought a sketchbook because of you.
do
but
it.
I didn't.
Oh.
I have some school journals. I have some black and white school journals. I got those.
You know,
yeah,
I've been working on commissions lately, so it's kind of hard to post somebody's commission, you know? Maybe that's what it is more than anything else. I've been doing a lot of work for work and then a lot of commissions outside, so maybe I'll post some more, but social media is Ryan_Liebe for Instagram, and that's the majority of where you could catch all of my work. There's years and years and years of stuff down in the feed. I think I'll start posting more. I have a second issue of Baxter written by my friend and the writer Sam Kissinger. And I'm hoping to have the second issue printed and ready for May's Acme Expo.
It's a great event, I hear.
Man, I just put myself on the line to color 14 pages. So
14? You can do that by next weekend.
You could do that by next weekend.
Yeah, so your self-published comic is Baxter. Where can they get the first issue of that?
You know, the first issue is something that you should definitely stop by the Acme Expo and pick up because it'll be there. I should open up a store front and sell those, and I think by the time the second issue is up, there'll be some sort of link that you can follow through my Instagram to pick up both issues.
All right, and that's Ryan spelled the correct way, and Liebe.
That's right.
That's right.
I don't know if that's spelled the correct way, but that's how we spell it.
Again, like I mentioned at the beginning of the podcast, you're easy to Google, so everyone should do it. Thanks, man. Thanks for pitching in. Thanks for hanging out. Normally we would have done this in person, but my back is a goddamn train wreck. I'm fine now. The second I try to stand up, it's gonna be a shit show.
Skateboarding, man. You got to give that shit up.
No, it's not skating. It's working on a kid's car, which I got to do tomorrow as well. But I think I'm just gonna supervise tomorrow. But yeah, thanks for hanging out, man.
It was a pleasure. Thank you for inviting me.